Hi, everybody. My name is Ember Kelley, and I am the Director of Religious Education here at the Fourth Universalist Society in the city of New York. This month, we've been grappling with the concept of colonialism and how, to do good justice work, we need to be learning about it and doing a bit more and confronting it. And so for our adult education YouTube this month, we thought that it would make a bit more sense to connect it to a modern concept that impacts a lot of us, and that is the idea of American exceptionalism. And so I'm really excited to sit down with Tyler Tully, who is a PhD student at Oxford. Tyler, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Tully. I'm originally from Oklahoma. I'm a PhD student at the University of Oxford studying the intersection of race, place, and settler colonialism.
And so Tyler and I know each other from seminary journeys together, and Tyler is going to also be a podcast guest coming out later this month. And so keep an eye out for that. We actually just finished recording that before we recorded this video. And so we're really excited to, I don't know how excited I am about American exceptionalism.
I'm excited to dog on American exceptionalism, so let's do it.
So one thing that as we were preparing for this, Tyler, we both talked about how we have experience being Americans abroad. A Solid Against Me song if you need some punk music for your afternoon. So would you like to tell me a little bit about your experience and what it is to be an American abroad and what people expect out of you?
I mean, I have to qualify it first. I mean, I think you've probably lived abroad longer than I did. So I got to vote in an election and experience what that mess was like once. Living abroad, I lived in the United Kingdom for a time before I did my exam. And gosh, being an American abroad really sucks sometimes because it's not that there aren't a lot of Americans living abroad. It's because there are so many Americans living abroad, and I don't know about you, but there was sometimes where, if somebody who mistaked me for like a Canadian, I wouldn't correct them necessarily, depending on the context. It's like, yeah, whatever you want to say. I'm just trying to get home. Americans have this they've earned a reputation abroad of being very loud and very entitled people. And especially when they go on vacation. And it's something that we've been doing since, we were founded as a country, going to exotic places. And, I'm sure if Instagram was a thing back in the day, Captain Cook would have been doing it too.
Well, and, I think that so many people are also, when they meet Americans that are living internationally or even just traveling internationally, that they also just expect that Americans just think that they're always right, and that America is the best and it is always right. I know when I doubted America's ability to respond well to the COVID pandemic to some friends as things started to develop, I was like, I've got a bit of experience with how bad the medical system is for access for a lot of people. And people were kind of shocked to see an American cast doubt on anything to do with America, because that wasn't the thing, when you're riding around on the motorbike with the Grab driver, which this is what the popular service was in Vietnam, and they say, oh, where are you from? And you say the United States, and they say, oh, Donald Trump? I'm like, no. What about Obama? Do you know Obama? I'm like, no, I do not know.
I know of Obama.
Yeah, we haven't traveled together. We're not close friends. But so people are. I think that one of the things that when I lived in Vietnam, that I was very intentional about is that I wanted to live there. I didn't want to just be an American living there. I wanted to be coming to understand the culture, getting to make Vietnamese friends, and not just taking my existence and transplanting it over to a new place, which is a very colonial attitude. That I wanted. So many Americans move over there, and then the only people they talk to are Americans, and maybe they talk to their TA or their secretary, but it's a very dominant to to a lower position sort of
Mm,
view.
hmm.
And I mean, gosh, it really bothered me, like seeing so many Americans that treated uh, Vietnamese folks like that they were expendable. And that's definitely related to American exceptionalism.
Oh, and it's yeah, and like just definitely related to the invasion of Vietnam, like only a couple of decades ago, right? Like we talk about like colonialism and this stuff, and it seems so far away, but we're talking about a country that was like we were at war with just a couple, in the lifetime of many of our listeners.
Right? Yeah, but many of the grandparents that I came across who were still so friendly and nice to me, despite the fact that my grandparents and parents' generations were, dropping bombs in
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam. It was a bit of a surreal experience sometimes to think
Sure.
about the fact that those people had lived through so much and yet were still so kind and interested in like getting to know people.
What I love
It
about
was
traveling abroad is when you encounter other cultures as a guest, and then you get to experience the world on its own terms. Like, for example, some of my favorite people in the world are Dutch people, and they're like so direct with you. So, for example, one time they found out that I was an American, and they just point blank asked me to like they held me to account for my government's behavior, and I was like, "Why are you holding me to account? I didn't vote for these people." And they're like, "This is your country. It doesn't matter, you know." And it was just a completely different perspective, that I think that we don't often get as Americans living in the continental United States.
well, I was going to say you could talk to them about the Dutch colonial history, but that's
Oh
a
gosh,
video
that's
for
another
another day.
conversation.
That's a video for another day. But I mean, so the thing is that this attitude that Americans are the best, that we are number one, that we are the world's
Hmm.
policeman, that we have the right way, and everybody else needs to learn from us. Like that,
Hmm.
it's pretty pervasive in the way that we exist in our own country. Even
Hmm.
I think that COVID has been so shocking for a lot of people because it's begun to show the cracks in that idea.
And I think a lot of people have had like existential crises around, like putting one's faith in something. Like if things get bad, something will catch us. Something is there to like help mitigate these circumstances that seem so far beyond our control. And I think the government or the healthcare industry or whatever you want to call it, was that for a lot of people, myself included. Admittedly, when this first began, my wife is not white, and she sat me down once and was just like, this like anxiety that you're feeling about being let down by the government. Like we deal with this every single day as people of color and women of color especially. um, and it just became like a real reality check for me that happened so late in my life, admittedly, to think on real terms about why something like the pandemic, which already seems so out of control for me, would be just astronomically different for people who have long histories of colonial relationships with science and medicine and with other power dynamics.
Right. And it's um gosh, that's a bit heavy to think about there. So now I got
Yeah, I
distracted
know, I
thinking about my
know.
next um but it definitely, I think, Trump was also the same thing that many people began to think like, oh, that couldn't happen here.
Right, right.
And but I mean, you still even see these sort of things reflected in just like even some of the liberal language, like around maybe like gun violence, I think is an
Mhm.
example where they're like, these belong in war zones, not on our streets. Like, why do they belong in somebody else's country? Like,
Right.
um, like we universalize, and I mean, it's so tied to. I mean, I don't think it can really be overcome if
Mhm.
we don't begin to grapple with like America's colonial history
You're
because
absolutely right. I mean, the
it's so
imagination. Chickasaw scholar Jody Bird has this amazing book called The Transitive Empire. If any of you all are into theory or you want to like look at something that's going to challenge like your norms, oh my gosh, I love Jody Bird's work. Jody wrote this amazing book and talks about, just lays it all out on the table about how both like in the military, how the U.S. military still refers to enemy territory as Indian country. Like the CIA and the SEALs. Code word for Osama bin Laden was Geronimo. Um, Everything that we learned as like the statecraft of like imperialist military expansion was through the Indian Wars, right? Like that's where the United States cut its teeth, and created these strategies. When Alito and others were like, not Alito, but when Bush's attorney general was looking for a precedent for waterboarding, they looked to the Seminole Wars for justification, legal justification, precedent, right? So when we look at the military side, there's no way we can't imagine it without it. But even like on the non-military side, like when we think about like the world being like our like open frontier, or like the American dream being associated with like Western expansion, and that being associated with progress, and that being associated with evolution, like we're talking about superiority and destiny, and all those old tropes.
Right. When I couldn't help but think as you were saying that, I thought about the pictures that were released last year where they showed that suddenly all the places where an American passport wasn't accepted. Whereas previously it had been that Americans could get into practically any country with very little extra work involved.
The outrage.
But at the same time, then it's expected for those from other countries to like get into the United States, or then expected that you have to go through this rigorous process to even get into the country, let alone just to visit. And it's so it's a colonial attitude, like that.
Absolutely.
That we can go anywhere we want, but like
mobility's for us and not for you.
Yeah, and I think as a religious community, as a UU community, it's important to begin to grapple with this, because I think that even in like progressive faith communities, there's still such that hint of American exceptionalism, that we can believe in this ideal. Like I can't help but thinking about, I was listening to a podcast, and it was advertising a separate podcast where it talked about, it was for Obama's podcast with what is it, Matthew McConaughey. It was an odd combination. I had to pause and reconsider. And
I'm still trying to wrap my head around that.
I could be wrong. Please, yell at us in the comments if I'm wrong. But that we
need to have Matthew McConaughey on the show, and we need to iron this out right now.
Fair. But the tagline was like, two people who believe in the American ideal, and I think that American ideal infects a lot of faith communities too. That they believe, instead of even if in some place like the UU where there's not a specific deity that's worshipped, but that instead we a lot of Americans come to worship America, across lines, whether it's evangelical Christians or progressive non-religious faith communities. Like the people come to worship America, and that is an act of American exceptionalism.
Absolutely. And I think it's so easy for us to see the way that certain reactionary and conservative people worship America as like an idol, like as an ideal and as like deity, if you will. But in other ways, like it's very invisible. For
golden statues of Trump,
actual literal statues of Trump, like literal like golden calves or brass calves. Man, I think it's actually really more difficult from the progressive angle, because that idol has been toppled, and in its place, we have something much more invisible. So an example that I like to use with my students is, if you have a choice between red as a color or blue as a color to draw this, assignment, which one would you rather pick? And they kind of hem and haw, like, can I get another color? And I'm like, sure, let's negotiate. Let's get out some of these other colors. We put all the colors out, and they finally make a choice, right? Well, from one angle, like, that's good. I haven't intentionally made them accept a color without their consent. They're like, theoretically like getting involved in this assignment and dynamic on their own. But at the end of the day, they're still choosing a color. Now, if I own the color, or if I'm invested just in color in general, whatever expression it might come across as, I still win. I still win in that game. And that's how settler colonialism works. When we start talking about settler colonialism, the whole point is not that it's just one government or one leader or one company that's worse than the others. It's the fact that it's this multi-headed hydra that can come out in all kinds of different forms that are seemingly contradictory. And even if they are like opposed to one another, if you peel back a couple layers, you're going to see that there is a common thread. There's something that they share in common, and that thing, that commonality, is always connected to power.
That to me seems like a wonderful place to leave our discussion. I would encourage folks to think about power, to think about colonialism, and to think about how all of that relates to Americans automatically assuming that they are the best and that America deserves worship.
Don't we have a cartoon to watch though?
Oh no, we don't have a cartoon to watch.
Oh man, I was really excited about a cartoon.
It was just it was only that I made a beautiful thumbnail, so I hope you all enjoyed our thumbnail as well. No, and so yeah, I would encourage you all to take some time and think about how American exceptionalism exists in your own life and ways that you can begin to challenge it as you challenge colonialism in your life.